We are so blessed to get to hear from Ruth Abigail Smith today. I'm not sure how we got her to say yes to being on Green Chair Conversations, but she did, and we are crazy thankful to have her. Ruth Abigail is the executive director and co-founder of AngelStreet, a ministry that develops young women through musical training in areas with limited access to the arts. In this episode, Ruth Abigail, or as you'll hear me call her, RA, talks honestly and openly about investing in the next generation, as well as how we can navigate the civil unrest we're experiencing. RA sheds a candid and practical light on how we can strive for unity in the midst of the division we're facing. So let's get to it and meet RA in the Green Chair. Ruth Abigail.
Hey.
You said yes.
Oh, and I don't know why.
You seriously said yes to the Green Chair.
I did.
And that makes me so happy. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So this makes you now the second female in the Green Chair.
Great.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
I don't know why I'm congratulating on the females that
I
get
think
in the
it's
chair.
fair.
But I think
I'm
well
honored.
done. Okay, so I'd love for you to kind of jump in and tell us a little bit about who you are. You're not born and raised Memphis.
Nope.
So tell us a little bit about that, kind of what you do for your job, AngelStreet, all the good stuff.
All of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not born and raised in Memphis. I got here in 2010.
Okay.
And I'm from Houston, Texas. Nice. And so, yeah, I moved down here a few months after my family moved.
Okay.
And took a job. I moved down here because I felt like I was being called to ministry, being called to youth outreach ministry in particular. And I knew I'd already made a decision. I didn't want to stay in Houston. I just didn't know how long it was going to be till I moved. So I moved down here, started working with streets, and did some programming, education, programming for middle and high school students, and then just kind of took it from there. So God just started to open up doors, and I just walked through the ones I felt like I was called to. So yeah.
So you did streets, and then you got into soul.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So I had an opportunity to do Soul for the City, which is an organization that does funding and training for youth workers. And so I did a lot of. I was able to get to pour into like young youth leaders, which was pretty cool, and get to know the city a little bit better because we kind of did things in all different parts of Memphis.
Yeah.
And so that was great. So I did that for about 4 years. And oddly enough, in that season, in the season of streets and soul, I helped to kind of start off AngelStreet along with Jill Dyson and Mary Jo Green. I moved into the full-time role with them as the executive director in January. And so Jill is just kind of doing a little bit of a different role, but still very, very much involved with AngelStreet. So we're rolling, and so that's what we've been doing. So it's been an incredible journey.
So for those people who don't know, what exactly is AngelStreet? Like, do y'all have like a mission statement or kind of what you do? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we are an organization that does mentoring and musical training for young ladies in neighborhoods that have limited artistic opportunities. And so we seek to help them to understand their value, discover their purpose, and then become creative leaders in our city.
Nice. That's really exciting. You guys are doing a really good work too. I really love what you're.
We love doing it.
Yeah. And those girls are awesome.
They really are.
We have them come here at Hope quite a bit.
Yeah,
and
we
been
do.
Fun.
Yeah,
that's been really fun.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted for our conversation is that I love that you're pouring into this next generation. I love that. Like I really do. I love that. Yeah. And we're going to touch on that a little bit. Yeah. But another layer of that is the civil unrest that's been happening. Yeah. You and I did a stirring talk together. We did. So this is like round 2 of you saying yes to me. I don't know.
I got to stop doing that. Yeah.
But part of this conversation, I do want to lean into that a little bit as we kind of have this. But for you personally, I mean, has there been a moment in your life, a story in your life where you really just became aware of your race? I mean, I know that's which one, right? But tell me like one that stands out, or maybe an early childhood.
Yeah. So actually, it was funny. I was thinking about this actually this morning.
Okay.
And 4th grade.
Okay.
I grew up in a school, went to school K through 12, where I was the only African American in my class, really up until high school. And so it was just me. And so we're in the 4th grade, and we were reading a book, about slavery. And I remember, that moment where like all eyes were on me, right? Because you have this book, and it's about slaves, and of course, everybody else in the room is white. I'm the only one that looks like the people on the book. Wow. And just having that moment, like actually I can see it in my mind. I can see where I was sitting and kind of feeling that kind of like, oh gosh, like this is weird. Yeah. And you're in 4th grade. I didn't really know how to process it, but that I remember that. And I would say, at least in the school setting, like that's where it was a clear like, hey, I'm definitely different. Yeah. And also I don't really know how to feel about that difference in this moment. You know? Like it's scary, and I'd rather not be here. Right. Yeah. So yeah, I would say that was the first real recollection I think I had as a kid in that regard. Yeah.
What about you told me a story about your piano teacher? Yeah. Is that right? Is that the right instrument?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the only instrument. I play no other instrument.
I got nervous on that one.
Yeah. So growing up in that context, I didn't have any black teachers in the school setting, and so I felt I couldn't have told you like I was missing that, but I didn't have that, and so I had taken piano lessons from the age of 6, and I had always had white teachers. Great teachers. Yeah. They're always white. Yeah. And I had taken a little bit of a break. I had decided to take a break from piano to play sports because, it's cooler. And then I got to the place where sports wasn't for me anymore. I wasn't as good. And I said, I want to jump back into music. But I had decided like I really didn't want to do the same type of music I had been doing. Like I wanted to do something different. And so my mom kind of asked around, and she actually asked the music director at the church I grew up in to recommend a teacher. And he did. And it was a African-American woman who, and this was important to me because quite frankly, one of the things that was hard for me was I had been taught classical music, that's just the way, that's what you teach. And so I didn't know any other black people that played classical music. The only thing I had seen black people play were like gospel and jazz, right? And I saw it mostly at church. And white people didn't play. Like I was like, I'm tired of doing the classical. Like I'd like to learn some of that too, right? Yeah. But none of the teachers that I had really did that and really, I thought, did that well. So that was part of the reason why I wanted to step away from it. And so when I went back into it, I told my mom, I said, I want to do piano, but I do not want to go back to the way I was doing it. So that's kind of the message she gave the music director. And he was like, I got the perfect person for you. And he was absolutely right. And so her name was Stephanie Scott. And she was actually like a musical prodigy. She went to North Texas at 16 and she did classical music and she did gospel. And I had never met anybody that could do both. Wow. And just like opened my eyes. I never met a black person that could do both. Let me say that. Yeah. And I just didn't know. Wow. And she like poured so much into me. I was supposed to be at her house for about an hour every week. I ended up being there for like 3, like all the time, and it was it was incredibly impactful. And so that was huge for me. And so when I think about AngelStreet and I think about what we do, that is a huge part of it is exposing young ladies that look like me to possibilities that people that look like us can do that you may not have seen, and just have an example, right, that you can really connect to. That's just huge. It's so important.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was getting ready to go. You went there, but just part of that kind of leaning into and like changing in a sense your direction with the AngelStreet and like kind of giving you that passion in a sense as well. But also I like that you say, you were talking to me about how with AngelStreet it's like you're lifting up a community. You don't use the word empower, or you try not to. But you educated me on this. I appreciated that. But would you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when I was being taught by my teacher, she opened my eyes to a possibility that I didn't see people like me doing, right? Playing classical and gospel music in my case. Like that was huge for me just to see another black woman doing something that I hadn't yet seen. Yeah. And so I think with AngelStreet, we have an incredible opportunity to do that, right?
Yes.
With the young ladies, is to really expose and show the possibility of what what they're able to do, right? And it's really limitless, right? And so I think seeing other people that look like you, for me, was huge in that. And so being able to then step into that role with young people is huge. And so I'm really, really grateful to do that.
Yeah, essentially doing what your teacher did to you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
No,
that's
exactly.
really neat. And now lifting up.
Yeah.
You say that you lift. It's like called. I think you said it was like lifting up a community. And I really like that.
Yeah. So this is an idea I've thought about a lot, probably in the last year or so, and just our role, as an organization with AngelStreet, but also just those of us that kind of work in the nonprofit community, right? And just kind of asking myself personally, what are we doing, right? For the places and in the places really that we exist, right? So we focus, and even in our mission statement, right? It's about the girls, it's about individuals. We want to pour into them. We want to mentor, train, expose, do these things with individuals. But in so many of our communities, the reality is we sit in communities, in AngelStreet's case, we sit in the Bickford community that has a lot of different, challenges. And it has been disinvested in, has been ignored in a lot of ways by the city, and it's a real thing. And so therefore families and, meet different struggles that we don't necessarily do in our, address in our programming, but as an organization, what can we do to not empower, because we don't have power to give, but more so to lift up the power that exists in the community, right? That's already there, that was there before us or anyone else arrived. We're lifting up. We want to build a platform together to let people know there's power here, and there's beauty here. And so we see that as a role that we can play as an organization. And so that's huge for me. I have a personal passion for seeing people get free, and kind of loving and at times leading people into that. And I think that is part of it, is recognizing that the power you have is not from people, but it is from God. And if you know that, then nobody can take your power away.
Absolutely. That's good. So ready to pivot?
Sure. Let's pivot.
So this has been a heavy couple of weeks. I mean, particularly with recently, since this was recorded, is Jacob Blake and Chadwick Boseman, right? The first African-American superhero, right?
Yeah, man.
And I've been crying my eyes out watching his videos and just going back through all these things that he did. Tommy works at St. Jude and he was over there and he had cancer and nobody knew it. Anyway, it's super powerful the way he that's a whole nother conversation. But I know it's been a heavy couple weeks. It's been a heavy months, years. It's been a lot, right? And I want to lean into this as much as you are personally comfortable leaning into it. Really words of advice or really wisdom to share with, like, how do we do this together, right? Like what encouragement or what advice or what challenges or critiques, anything really, would you give me as a white woman? But also, what would you give, like, I'm hearing from my African-American friends, like, it's discouraged, like, they're discouraged, they're despairing, like, it's heavy and it's hard. So you kind of have these both ands, and I know it's a lot of, just give us all your wisdom. But here's why I ask you this question, and this is what you and I talked pretty honestly about, is, I'm on social media and I'm seeing lots of contradictory things, right? I'm listening to my African-American brothers and sisters say, do this, don't do this, do this. And I'm trying to learn. I want to learn. Genuinely, I want to learn. And I want to grow. And so I kind of want to hear that from you. I mean, you're a real person. You're a friend of mine, right? I want to hear, and I know all these people know and respect you as well. So what would you have? What would your encouragement be? No big question, right?
Oh, man.
You love when I do that to you.
I'm telling you, this is my favorite. I think one of the simplest things I would just say first off is do exactly what you're doing, right? Talk to a real person.
Yes.
Yes. Because we do are putting all this stuff on social media. And I think a lot of it is really healthy, right? These are some things that probably you should do, or questions to ask, or ways to educate yourself, and things to think about. Like, that's good stuff. Like, I think it's healthy for everyone to kind of work through that. But it's not, number one, it's not the answer for everyone. And I think one of the things in the Black community that we know better than I think other people outside the community is that we are not of the same mind. We don't think or act or vote in a monolithic fashion. And so, but because, let's see, try to put this the best way I can.
You're doing great, yeah.
So I think a privilege that that white people have is to operate from an individual standpoint. And that's a privilege. Because when you can't, oppressing one person doesn't do much. You have to oppress groups of people. And one of the best ways to do that is then to define a group in one way, right? And then you use that kind of language and reality to then decide what is best for a group, or how to think about a group, or what. And so I think for African Americans and for other groups of minorities in America, we do that, right? And I think we have to come to the understanding that's not the case. So when we do see things out there that are like, hey, white people do this for Black people. I think sometimes we have to take that with a grain of salt, because some Black people process things differently than others, right? For some, like we were talking about earlier, like some, it's like, I don't want to talk. Like, I am tired of talking. And for others, are energized by it, right? I'll use myself as an example. I'm more so at this season of my life. This hasn't always been the case. I'm more energized. I have the energy to have these types of conversations. I think it's the grace that God has given me, and so I'm willing to do it. I have a lot of Black friends that really are just not interested. Right. And so, but if people don't know that on a personal basis, right, we'll take this information that we're seeing from a very broad view, and we'll apply it to everybody, and we'll get it wrong. And so I think talking to a real person, developing real relationships, and not just around race, as a person. And race should be a part of that. If it's not, then I think that's another conversation. But it doesn't have to just be that. Did that?
No, that makes sense. And I think it's interesting too, of just like, the real person thing is huge, in that knowing, like, I remember when you and I were talking about this, and I'm like, now are you too just shot to have this conversation? Like, emotionally, are you just done? Like, can you have this conversation with me in front of a camera? No. But I think it's being able to have a relationship enough to say that I could say that to you, and you could say, you could say, I can't do this right now. Like, I'm checked out. I can't talk about it. And I think that that's important, is building those relationships. And, it was interesting. I was thinking of when we were talking about how the first time you became aware of your race, I couldn't help but think in my mind, when's the first time I became aware of my race? And I was like, college? Right? And that says something, right? And so I think it was maybe college, and I can kind of remember an instance, but I just think, I think that's interesting as we're having this dialogue of, I think we want to make, okay, so tell me how to have this conversation with all Black people.
Right.
But they're different. Everybody's different, right?
And so and it's easier to take that approach. It's easier to kind of have a cookie cutter view of a conversation than to do the work of really getting to know a person. And I mean, let's be honest, we all would go for the easier. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, all of us were like, okay, that's great. Give me a formula, I'll follow it. But people aren't formulas, and you can't do that. And I think that, when people genuinely want to kind of play their part in making change in the world, it shouldn't be easy. It's not a formula. And it's gonna be hard and uncomfortable.
How are you pushing through all this heaviness? I mean, that's another layer too, is like, what about to the people that are really struggling right now?
I think I was saying to somebody else, earlier, like, I think one of the most healthy things we can do is feel how you feel, and don't feel bad about feeling that way. Like, I think,
that's really good.
Don't allow the pressure to make you feel like I have to figure this out now. You really don't.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, I'm grateful to have kind of developed that philosophy in life in general. Like, and it hasn't always been that way. Most of my life, I felt like I have to feel obligated to be a thing in a moment. But no, like I'm gonna feel this way.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna feel it until I don't.
Yeah.
And then I'll figure out what to do.
Yeah.
Right. Like, but give yourself time to feel, and express. Right.
And
So
not push
people-
through, not cover it
right,
up, just
right,
kind of allow
exactly.
it to
Just let it be, you know, and process with people you trust.
Yes.
And doesn't have to. And I think for you know, I know we talk about it. I talk about it with a lot of my friends. Like some things I don't want to talk about with white people.
Yeah. No,
I don't. You
that's
know,
fair.
some things I don't, and some things are more healthy to talk about with people that are like you.
Yes.
And so,
Yes.
you know, I think especially those of us that have diverse groups of friends, it can feel like, you know, pressure.
Yeah.
To have to include.
Yeah.
White people in a lot of conversations, and you don't.
Yeah.
And you don't have to feel bad about that.
Yeah.
Process it the way you need to process it, you know. And I think you know, those that are friends with white people that are friends with black people hopefully are able to give that kind of leeway.
Yeah.
And not feel excluded.
Yeah.
Right.
Space.
Yeah. Just like, hey, sometimes this is just you have to do this, and that's okay.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so application, right?
Yeah.
So what would you encourage? Like, I love that you, number one, have all these layers, and I just want to like keep going. And I know you're like, get out of my business. But I do want to hear a little bit about like, okay, so what about for those people who are like, you're investing in the next generation? I feel like that's a really cool layer. What about for people who are investing in diverse friendships, relationships? Like, what kind of advice would you give them as we're kind of navigating this? I mean, there's a lot of division right now, right?
Sure.
And I want to strive for unity, right? Like, how can we do that? But what kind of advice or encouragement would you give people?
I want to know, do you ask everybody these
I always ask an application question, but I'm sorry, I'm pressing you a little bit.
I love it. No, I'm just joking.
I mean, I love starting with the talk to real people thing. I think that's
Yeah.
key, and I would like, I want to say that over and over and over and over again, because I think a lot of the stuff we're getting is from social media.
Yeah.
And I think even like limiting ours, like you and I had talked about that in the stirring conversation, is like we got to have boundaries on that too, right? But talking to real people is key, like over and over and over again.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that talking to real people about real things.
Ooh, that's good. That's good. Yeah.
I think is healthy. You know, we can't. It's time out for sugarcoating. And for trying to paint a picture that looks better than it is. And it really doesn't, whether somebody understands it or believes it or agrees with it is just not the point. But talk about what's real to you.
Yeah.
And allow people to talk about what's real to them, right? On both sides. That's the only way we're going to have unity. And I think, you know, to your point, striving for unity, that's the only way we get there, right? Is by talking to real people about real things. And what's real to you may not be real to me, but it doesn't discount it as what's true. You know, like it doesn't negate the reality of it because I don't understand it, or because I may not agree with it. And so I think that's a huge, huge, huge thing. So that's one thing I would say. I think
we talked about education, which was kind of cool, like locally. You really honed in on that, which I thought was real interesting.
Yeah. So I think as far as just applying some of this stuff, I think applying it to home. I think that's so important. When I say home, I don't mean like your family home. I mean like the city you live in. Yeah. Because, you know, I think about where we are right now, right? Yeah. The election and this all, you know, just we're hearing about the presidential election. And this is like every year, right? It's every 4 years. I mean, where the presidential election gets all the attention. And especially in moments like this where it's so tense. Yes. And it's really interesting to see all the energy around that. But then, you know, like we just had an election here locally last year that very few people participated in. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And I think that just being educated on the fact that, number one, like when your voice is best heard in the city you're in. Yeah. Go out and vote for the national election. I think that's we should do that, right?
Absolutely.
But if that's the only election you're voting in, I think the reality is the voice that you have and that you want is squashed. If you really want your voice to be heard in a real way, get to know what's going on in your city, and get involved in that. And I think that's I think it's vital. And so I would encourage people to get educated on what's going on here in Memphis. And also don't trust the news to tell you that. Because the news has a spin and a story, and we all know that that's real. Go out, really understand what's going on.
With real people.
Get closer to the ground, get involved, hear stories, and talk to people that you don't have anything in common with, right? And so I think doing that and focusing in locally, again, getting educated on those things. Who's your city council member? Who's your commissioner? What what are the issues that are affecting your community, right? All of those things. When are local elections? Do you even know when that is? And paying attention to that. I think it's important, as well as statewide stuff. And people don't. I know a lot of my politics. Politics doesn't have to be any. Politics, in my opinion, is really just getting involved in what you're doing, getting involved in the life of your city. That's it. Doesn't have to be anything.
It doesn't have to be this big division.
No, it doesn't. Get involved in the life of your city and let your voice be heard. You know, whether it's in a voting box, whether it's at a rally, whether it's at a protest, whatever it is, get out there and get involved.
And you talk about the heart change piece too, which is interesting. I mean, that's another good little application. Application piece.
I think. So before any of that, it's important to, I think, what's on the inside is going to eventually come on the outside. And so if you're not working internally, right, on how you're growing spiritually, how you're growing relationally, how you're growing emotionally and mentally, all those things, I think that's the first step, right? And in this particular context, again, talking to people, allowing God to work on your heart and how you view other people, first of all. Like, how do you even view other people? And then how does that dictate how you move in the world? And so really taking a good look at yourself in that way, and build relationships. And then start there, right? And so I think it's important to know kind of what stage you're at, But I also think it's important to know that no matter where you are, there's always another step to go. And so doing the internal work is so important. But don't stop there, because see if I can say this in a way that makes sense. At the end of the day, your heart change doesn't change anything. Your hands do, right? Your hands and feet change stuff. Your actions change stuff. Your heart changes you. And that's beautiful for you. But if you want a world to be different, you've got to do some things.
Ooh, you're going to start preaching.
Nope, that's your job.
That's good. I like that. Ruth Abigail, thank you so much for being here. It wasn't too bad, right?
It wasn't horrible.
It wasn't horrible. But it went awesome. That's what
it was amazing.
There you go. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. We so appreciate you
being
here.
Having me.
And that is a wrap for our Green Chair conversation with Ruth Abigail Smith. Thank you so much for being connected with us today. Don't forget, you can share today's conversation with a friend or even post on your social media platforms if you're interested in connecting further or getting additional resources to take this conversation beyond the chair. You can email me at greenchair@hopechurchmemphis.com. Love you guys. See you next week.